Where is Highguard? In 20 days, this game is slated to launch, and there is no further information other than what they actually gave us back at the end of the Game Awards last year, and that was a rather ill-fated decision, to put it quite mildly. The reaction to this game has been not great. This is potentially the first big failure in gaming in 2026. Not that I'm wishing for failures, but this game seems extremely ill-conceived. Of course, unless the gameplay is mind-blowing. Now, in terms of the gameplay, well, this is it's from the creators of Apex Legends and Titanfall, and it's Highguard, a PvP raid shooter where players will ride, fight, and raid as wardens, arcane gunslingers sent to battle for control of a mythical continent. There, they'll clash against rival warden crews for possession of the shield breaker, and then break into and destroy the enemy base to secure territory in this all-new breed of shooter. Now, obviously, if we look at the trailer, which is basically the only thing we've got of the game so far, it looks to me like there's some sort of base assault attack mechanic, and I guess that's what they're referring to when they say raid. So we've got a base, the enemy team have got a base, we need to fight over an object, in this case it seems to be a big sword, which then gives us the ability to break down the shields on their base, and then we can start attacking their base. Now, because I'm so old, I remember games like LAPD Cop, or LA Cop, what was it called? LA Cop, something that was on PlayStation 1. And it was a tower defense game before, I guess, they were a thing. But you had to like use waves of your robots and stuff to break through to the enemy's base and then knock out their base. Anyway, that's a crazy example. A better example would be something like Heroes of the Storm or a MOBA game where you can't attack the Nexus straight away. You've got to go through and complete certain objectives. In this case, it looks like they're going down the route of like almost like an FPS MOBA, but they're sort of, I guess, adapting it for more of a fast-paced environment with maybe some Apex Legends elements in it and stuff like that. It's kind of interesting, but we've got no information really beyond what they've given us. And why is that? Well, if we go and look at the Highguard World Premiere trailer over on YouTube, we can see, now again, I will say this dislike add-on is not accurate. It just gives you a ballpark figure, but the likes, they tell a story. Yeah, when your video has got 92,000 views and it's got 1,000 likes, probably, especially if it's this high caliber, I guess, even though actually I wouldn't say that's not too bad, because 92,000 to 1k, I don't know, maybe that's okay. But this add-on is reporting 12,000 dislikes, and you only really need to look at the comments, and you can see like the first top comment is literally someone going, "No wonder nobody leaked this," which I think tells its own story. It is, yeah, not great. Now, one of the issues with this is it's from the makers of Titanfall. For a long time, everyone's been hoping for a Titanfall 3. We know EA are not going to do this, but it would be nice if the developers that were responsible for Titanfall came along and made their own version of it. I think that's what the people were hoping for. Instead, they've got what looks like, and again, to use some very harsh language here, which has been floating around on the internet, it almost looks AI generated. Now, the game isn't AI generated, I should say that, but it looks like so generic. It's something they've asked an AI bot to give them images of what these protagonists could look like and these heroes, and that's what it's generated. It looks very, very generic, which is a big issue, because in this day and age of free-to-play games, you need to stand out. I think this is free-to-play, actually. I'm not even sure. I think it is. But you need to stand out, right? As you're just not going to capture people's attention. Now, there are some ways where you can kind of gauge the reaction to a game before it launches. These are things like, what is the social buzz? Which is a really cheesy way of saying, are people even talking about this game? Because nobody is talking about your game, or if they aren't, or if nobody is talking about your game, I should say, then you're basically screwed unless your game launches with an absolute massive explosion of publicity and it really takes off. That's going to be difficult, right? So when we look at Highguard, we see they've got a Twitter account, they've got a YouTube channel, and that's it. They don't seem to have any of the other social media you would expect off a game with a high level of funding, which is what this game clearly has. Also, it's quite funny. It's called Highguard. Overwatch, Highguard. Not that it's the same as Overwatch, I'm saying, but it's still a hero-based shooter, but it's got the base raid mechanic in it instead. Would be funny if Overwatch added that as a gameplay mode, wouldn't it, this year? And that was their big update. That would be actually quite funny. Anyway, they've just got a Twitter account. So if we take a look at their Twitter account, you'll be like, okay, what's actually going on here? Well, they've got 5,863 followers. There isn't any tweets that have been pumped out recently. In fact, the last one was the 12th of December, which was just, obviously talking about the Game Awards. What's more sort of, can I say, this is like, I'm going to be real here, and I think a lot of these game companies, especially these ones that are formed in California, that are made of developers from other big studios, they've got a very warped way of how you actually build a community for a game, and they do it in this very formulaic way, which might have worked 10 years ago, but really doesn't work anymore, and in fact, looks like a boomer operating social media, right? So they do this thing where they refer to everyone as a warden. Thanks, warden. Can't wait to show you more, and all that kind of stuff, and it's really cheesy. I'm scrolling through their comments here, and it looks like they kind of maybe tailed back a little bit on that. They're literally responding to anyone who has got a blue tick, who has replied saying, "Oh, we can't wait for you on the 26th of Jan. Yeah, looking forward to seeing you in battle, Warden. You honor us, Warden." It's like, come on, what are we talking about here, guys? No one even knows what this is. You know what I mean? It's really cheesy. But again, like I said, the other issue is there isn't even any TikTok. There isn't any Instagram. There isn't any of that. It's like, well, how are you going to advertise your game? Like, there are different types of advertising, right? There's paid advertising. There's influencer activations where you obviously pay influencers to make content on your game. And then there's just organic advertising that you can do yourself, which you should be preparing and you should be launching, probably before 20 days when your game comes out. And like I said, nothing is coming out at this moment in time with the game. Now, when you go and look at their official website, it's actually kind of funny, this is, because it has this massive countdown, and it's like 20 days until launch. It's like, wow, I can't believe this. The game's going to be out in 20 days. Wishlist it now on Steam. And it's like, okay, but I don't even know what this is. You can watch the trailer. And by the way, the website is not very good as well. This is not great. When you scroll on the website, it's really spongy. Like, it's not accurate at all. It's really odd. You sort of end where you don't expect to be, and it scrolls too fast. It's not good. They then push you to wishlist. And the reason why games are heavy into getting you to wishlist is because there's a certain metric of the number of wish lists you get that converts to a number of sales. So they can sort of predict what they're going to get. I don't know what the figures are. Let's just make it up and say it's 10%. So if you get 100 wish lists, then you should expect 10 people to buy your game or spend money in your game, right? So it's how they work out if their game's making an impact or not. Obviously, based off this, we can tell the game is not making an impact at all. And in fact, it's made quite the opposite impact because it looks so generic, which is going against the game. Now, they've also got a YouTube channel, which again just has the trailer on and has got 1,320 subscribers on it, which again isn't a great sign for this game. And you can look at other games that are out there. I don't want to throw shade on these games, but I think it's quite obvious these games didn't perform very well. Supervive is a game which is actually closing down in February this year. This suffered from this same problem where you can see a lot of the media they're putting out just isn't getting views. That means people are not really interested in the game. No one is searching for that game. No one's looking for it. They're a bit perplexed when they get to it. They think, what's this kind of content? That game is a little bit unique in some ways, though, because it did have a high player number to begin with. So you could maybe say the developers themselves failed to basically make the gameplay interesting enough to keep those players playing. So that game's resulted in being closed down. Another one is Wildgate. Again, there's another similar theme here. These are studios set up in California with ex-big studio developers, either from Riot, Blizzard, EA, wherever they're coming from. They set these studios up and they seem to go down the same sort of path. It's rather intriguing how this keeps happening. But yeah, Wildgate is one, right? It's got very low player numbers. It's failing to get any kind of traction, really. And again, people are not talking about the game. People are not interested enough in the game. Now, again, that could be for gameplay reasons, which does bring me on to this other point with Highguard. This is a game that could be one of those ill-fated games where it was a good idea when they started developing it, but because it took so long to develop, over a number of years, it now becomes less relevant. And you see this effect with games like Overwatch, where in fact, you can go even further back than that. World of Warcraft, that comes out, it starts taking over the world. Then you see a whole host of games that are trying to clone, and you've got this whole idea of the WoW killer. That's, I guess, originally where this came from. And then maybe you could go even further back and say Doom killer, because that was probably a thing. Well, it was a thing back in the day. But let's say World of Warcraft killer. But then obviously Blizzard do it again with Overwatch. They reinvent the hero genre. So everyone goes away and starts developing hero shooters, and you start seeing them launch. And only really Marvel Rivals has managed to actually make any kind of dent into that market. The rest of them all sort of fall away. And it's like this Highguard game, they're trying to blend other genres together. Again, like Supervive has tried in the past. And obviously they've completely failed because the game's going offline. But when you take a MOBA and then you sort of mash it with a battle royale, it didn't work. Now, I'm not saying that can't work like 100%. Maybe it can if it's done in a way which actually delights players and wants them to play. Like Supervive had a problem where, again, I'm going to get this a bit wrong, but some of the items in the game, you basically were randomly assigned, and some of them could be better than the other ones, and then you ended leveling them up through the season, but you basically could lose to RNG, which is stupid, right? Not a good decision. I think it was called the Armory system or something. But regardless, it doesn't matter. The game's going offline. Highguard, well, it just seems like it's ticking all of the boxes for a game that is once again going to come out and have these big problems where you've got this promise of, we've got this great idea, hero shooters are really popular, we're going to mix Apex Legends with a hero shooter and throw in a bit of MOBA sort of base defense element to it. This is going to be awesome. We're going to have mounts where you can traverse the map really quick. It's going to have really fast combat. We're going to have abilities. We're going to have these heroes, and it's going to be in this fantasy world. And then, hey, it's going to be great. So on paper, it sounds like, okay, this could work. We're taking all the big genres, mashing them together. It's going to be fantastic. But that probably would have worked 5, 6, 7 years ago, or maybe worked is a strong thing. It would have maybe looked different enough. But now, the problem we've got, and again, this is a wider problem with the gaming industry, everything is so massively saturated, you literally don't have the time to bounce onto these other games and play them with any conviction unless these games are literally genre-defining or they invent a new genre. One recently which has done this is Ark Raiders. It's come out of, not nowhere, but it's come out and it's really nailed what it does, and it does it really well, and it's managed to pick up a large player base, and it's probably affecting quite a lot of other games out there. But again, it's free to play. It has to do something amazing. Sorry, it's not free to play. I do apologize. It's $40. Ark Raiders this, which again is more testament to the fact that this can, bring people together and actually play the game, in any kind of duration and keep them engaged. But using free to play as an example, with the free to play games, you end up in a situation where you can play all these different games. You don't have enough time, and you end up with that sunk cost fallacy where I've played X game for so long. Why would I go and play Y game? So the only way to break out of this is to give an option. In fact, let me rephrase this. It's not so much about the game being free to play or the game being paid. It's the fact the game's live service, and that is a problem, because if the live service game, you can only invest so much time, right? It doesn't matter if you're paying or you aren't. You can't play 3 or 4 live service games to any kind of extent, because it's going to sap away all of your time. You just won't have the time to do it. So games like Highguard, how do they break that mold? Problem is, looking at all this footage that we've seen in this video, I'm sure you guys are sitting there going, well, this just looks so generic. I don't know what's going on here. Why haven't they made a different version of Titanfall? I mean, you can go back and look at games of the past where you had Medal of Honor, which was really popular, and then the team behind Medal of Honor go away and come up with Call of Duty as a competitor and basically take out Medal of Honor. This thing has happened in the past, and maybe it can happen again. I don't know. But with this game, I don't think we're going to see any kind of traction. And I think what's going on is, again, unless it just blows our socks off, which it might, because we're not seeing, or we're not playing the game, we haven't seen anything other than the little gameplay trailers they've dropped. But the big question here is, in 20 days, this will launch, and what the hell will happen to this game? I don't think this is looking good. I think this looks way too generic. I think they haven't done a very good job at all of creating an initial splash. And don't get me wrong here, guys. They would have spent a ton of money to have the final slot at the Game Awards, because that's like, millions of people are watching that. They want to make an impact, and their feedback they're getting from that is, what the actual hell is this? What are you developing? What are you doing? Who thought this was a good idea? And the only way to win those people over is to deliver gameplay which is genuinely insane once people get their hands on it. Because the problem now is this brand name, this branding is so generic and all of that stuff. People, it's gone. Highguard, who cares, right? Unless the game's insane. If the game's insane, then maybe they can dig it out. But if it's just too generic, if it's too, well, this is just Apex Legends and I've got a mount, and it's, what's this thing about attacking a base? It's going to be a big problem. And again, it all comes down to monetization as well, how that fits into the game. All right, let me know what you think about this, guys, in the comments below. But Highguard, I don't think it's looking good for this game at all. And I think the silence from the developers is probably telling a story in and of itself, which is not great. But anyway, it launches in 20 days. So, yeah, I'm sure you'll see a lot of the usual suspects on Twitch being paid to play this game. Inflates the category when it goes live, and then it drops off a cliff a week later when nobody's being paid. All right, guys, I'll catch you on the next one. See you soon.